back to the Daily Combat Podcast. I'm here with real estate mogul Dave Stockbridge. I'm going to say that.
You're going to come up with something else.
And world champion Muay Thai kickboxer Harley Gangell. So she's joining us again. We did do an episode before that. You can go back and watch that as well. But she's decided to stick around. She's teaching a Muay Thai class later tonight. So we were lucky enough to have her stay, and we'll continue chatting. One of the things I wanted to talk about was health in sports and how sports can be presented as, you know, health and fitness, and it's something that you should be doing that's going to increase your longevity and make sure that you're working really hard and discipline and sacrifice and everything's going really well. But underneath of that, there is so many aspects to many sports where health is like the last thing on the list. And it's like, get the job done no matter what, whether it's weight cutting or whether it's restrictive dieting or fighting opponents that are way stronger or more experienced or
even overeating.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. That's right. And there's so many aspects to that. One of the things, so bodybuilding, right?
Yeah.
Guys step on stage, say Mr. Olympia competition.
Yep.
They are so dehydrated. They look really lean, super lean, right? They've been dieting for months leading up to this competition. They do 2 shows that day, one in the morning, one at night.
Yeah.
The difference between morning and night can be the difference between winning and losing.
For sure.
Which is insane. And it's like, because people look at the way that they look on those photos on that day and they say, oh man, this guy's amazing or it's incredible. Even locally, like people that are in the gym and they train and they diet for a competition and then, you know, they step on stage lean and, you know, in the shape that they were trying to achieve. The day after, obviously, they'll go back to normal, regular eating and they will increase their body weight back to a normal level. But to them, it's like they're looking at themselves as that, you know, 5% body fat on stage, dehydrated, as that's how I should look all the time. And it's like, it plays with people's minds. It frustrates me. It's like, that was a specific purpose. You were only looking like that for a couple of hours of that day. It's not, and as I said, at the top professional world champion, Mr. Olympia level, they can't maintain that for a whole day.
But I think part of the dilemma is that there is a definite difference between health and sport. And there is some degree of health that needs to be given up in the pursuit of sport. And I think in combat sports in particular, there's a lot at risk. You know, you can get knocked out. There can be serious damage as a result of just being there in the ring or in the cage. In bodybuilding, you know, that's usually it normally leads to kidney failure or heart issues very early on in life. I think ultimately there's, for young people, it's really difficult. We were talking about young females earlier and the dilemmas that just through bad diet selection, really bad dehydration and the like, and the long-term effects of that. But no one's thinking about that when they're young and they're going for gold. So what type of learnings are there now in place for young athletes? And in Muay Thai, has there been a movement towards supporting athletes as they're developing in their younger years to ensure that they don't fall into these traps?
I think the biggest thing is around the weight cutting side of things. If people aren't cutting as much weight, then the difference in their body from when they're competing to when they're not competing isn't that big of a difference. So obviously the heavier their weight cutting, that's, as you said, it's not maintainable. So, you know, and I'm talking from perhaps a female perspective and my fight career, you know, seeing yourself at weigh-in, it's fantastic to be that lean, not maintainable. But when you then go and live a normal life for 2 weeks and you put on weight and you actually just get to a healthy weight, you know, in our minds, we're like, oh, we're overweight. Like, this is terrible. We're too big.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the later stages of my career where I wasn't cutting as much weight, the difference between my fight physique and my, you know, regular life physique of just enjoying training and still, you know, eating okay, you know, it's not that big of a difference. So I think by eliminating those severe weight cuts, you're actually dealing with a lot broader issues as well.
And you were mentioning that some of the things that have happened recently in the fight world have been not with the weigh-ins. In Muay Thai, fighters wearing clothes and not standing there in their bathers or just in their shorts, but having a t-shirt, having a sponsor shirt on, being covered up so that there isn't that status that's achieved by being super lean on the scales at the weigh-in.
Yeah, that's right. And as I sort of touched on, we were discussing before that there was a bit of a culture around cutting weight in the earlier stages of my fight career. So running in a sweatsuit was considered, cool. And the more weight that you were cutting, the more badass you were.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the same thing, when you get to weigh-in and you're standing there in your underwear and your crop top, wearing the bare minimum, the more ripped and lean and, more dehydrated you look, the cooler it was. And a lot of people probably don't want to admit that, but that's truly what it was. So by some promotions now, not advertising fighters on the scales, they're just taking a photo in front of the sponsor banners in Muay Thai shorts, in a promotion shirt. At minimum, they'll just wear the Muay Thai shorts, but even still, it's still covering quite a bit. They are taking that status away from the weigh-in. And I've definitely seen a bit of a culture shift since some promoters on big shows have been doing that, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, young people are already very body conscious and very sensitive around that. Have you seen any negative knock-ons as a result of this culture of weight cutting?
Yes, I just think, by, having the UFC and young people seeing how they are at weigh-ins, I think that in itself is difficult for young people to comprehend. And, a lot of young people don't understand what has gone into someone being able to look that way. So
and then they look at that and think, why don't I look like that? I'm training hard.
That's right. I went for a 5K run yesterday. Why don't I look like that? So, yeah, I think that's the media has a lot to do with that. Social media can be a bit of a trap for young people these days, especially young athletes for sure.
Well, Matt, and you've mentioned that there was a female fighter on the scales at the UFC, and she literally fainted on the scales.
Fainted on the scale, and they picked her up, and then she went and weighed in again, and then she got like, oh yeah, you've made the weight, and then she stepped off the scale and fainted again on the stage, and it was like, what is this? How can
and
you
it's
let
not
this
good
happen?
for the sport either, is it? It looks terrible for the sport.
Absolutely, and you're supposed to be promoting this is a fun. I mean, at its core, it's a fitness event. You're supposed to be having a good time going to these sorts of things, and you want to be competing because it's competitive, but and you want to win. But at its core, it must be fun. You must be enjoying the process. And if it's to the point where my health is at risk and I am doing these things that are dehydrating myself, I'm getting kidney problems, I'm getting this problem, mental health issues. It's like, this isn't fun. This isn't a fun aspect to it. And it's that obsession that you can sort of see with people that get whatever they're chasing, whatever the goal is. It doesn't have to be sport, but when people get obsessed with something and they're willing to sacrifice everything for that one thing, and it sort of becomes their life. And you see it where George St. Pierre had to step away. He was like, I can't stop. Like, I'm just thinking of training 24/7 and it's doing my head in because I can't relax. I am always pressuring myself. I must go to training. I must do this. I must do that. And that's that discipline that comes into it. And you want a fighter or somebody who's trying to be successful to have those attributes. But when it becomes that you're a slave to that obsession, that's where it's a problem. And it's like, I respect him for being able to do that and saying, look, I am having a problem with this. Even though he was world champion, he's like, I need to step away. If you want to take the belt from me, then that's what we'll do. I will retire and I'll, get myself right and then come back. So, yeah, it's a double-edged sword because you want to do the right things to get the result. But when the right things are unhealthy or dangerous or start taking over your life and affecting it negatively, that's where it's like, maybe you need to reevaluate this.
And there is, well, as with any athlete, but there's a life after fighting, and you do have to consider that. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where, we shouldn't consider that. I know a lot of fighters, and I was one of them for a little while, where obviously you make something your goal every day to be the best, so you're working towards it, but there has to be a point where you're thinking about the bigger picture. You have to ask yourself realistically, am I going to make it enough to support the rest of my life? If the answer is no, then there needs to be a plan B. So if anything, you've got to work harder to make sure that you've got both avenues. So, you know, I know a few fighters that have given up their, you know, uni degrees or quit their jobs, which is all well and good. I am all for going towards that goal. And some people, you know, you do have to give up everything and make those sacrifices. But, you know, if you're in a sport like, for example, Muay Thai, it's never going to be MMA and the UFC. So there's got to be a plan B for, you know, and that includes not destroying your body to the point where it's going to affect you after your career's finished.
I think it's really hard for a lot of fighters or a lot of people involved in combat sports, because in combat sports there's not even the financial upside necessarily associated with it. So it's not like, well, by winning you're going to be a millionaire all of a sudden. It's like, well, you win and you might get a belt, you might get a medal, you might not get anything. And so when people are risking their health, like in downstream, you know, we in bodybuilding, you know, you go down and you see the gym bros on PEDs and they're, you know, they're 26 years old and they're abusing their bodies to attain an aesthetic that will fade very, very quickly. And as you said, there's a life after that, but they're not even thinking about that at that age. What was your regime coming into a fight? So if you're a month out, and did your diet start to change, or how did your diet start to change, and how many calories were you taking in, and what was your routine and regime like leading into a fight?
So I kind of had two different stages of my fight career. So there was kind of the first 3 quarters, which were I had negative experiences, you know, with the cutting weight, again, the old school mentality. Towards the end, I invested in the right resources to get me there safely. So I had a nutritionist, who was absolutely fantastic, and I had a really high level strength and conditioning coach. So you know, towards the end, you know, the later stages in my fight career recently, you know, my regime was so much more relaxed actually, because the results from the resources that I had invested in were just doing what they were meant to be doing. So, you know, I'd follow my meal plan. She wouldn't actually tell me how many calories I was taking in. I didn't need to count anything. She had done it so that it was just, I felt relaxed about it. As long as I was following that plan, my weight was just coming off. She would work with my strength and conditioning coach. And so towards, my last few fights, I was able to work as well, which was massive. I had the energy to still be able to work in my business, whereas before that, I would actually step away and have other trainers do my job because I was so fatigued. So, you know, in actually changing my methods, I was achieving a hell of a lot more. I finished my uni degree, you know, so I was able to do all of that just by changing my thinking around dieting and my approach to training, you know, smarter, still hard, but smarter, but not harder.
Yeah, training smarter, not harder, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what you were taking in, like food-wise, did that change? Did the types of foods or food mixing, like, you know, you hear a lot of people, they're just on the broccoli and the brown rice, or the white rice, the brown rice. I don't know. I mean, the good rice. Yeah, they're not on the wheat bix. It was did you have a certain type of food you had to eat that you hated?
No.
Oh, you were very lucky.
No. So in the first, you know, in my bad stages when I was uneducated, I was on the chicken and the broccoli and the fish and never eating anything that I enjoyed. And then all of a sudden I had this nutritionist that was like, okay, what's your favourite thing? And I was like, chocolate.
Fried Mars bar. Oh, chocolate.
Yeah, I'll take the fried Mars bar. But, you know, and she incorporated that into my week based on how I was training. And I was...
So you were dipping the broccoli in the chocolate?
Broccoli fondue was delicious.
Secret training techniques here.
So, yeah, and also, you know, eating so much that, well, obviously my calories increased significantly, that I had so much energy that my performance went up, that my weight was dropping quicker and my physique changed. And, you know, I was eating things that I would have totally restricted myself to before. So, you know, having those sweet potato chips, having that nice big pile of rice and sometimes having that chocolate, So like, yeah, it was a game changer.
And what was your post weigh-in reward? What was your go-to?
Oh, do you know what? This also changed. So it used to be, I just want a massive pizza. But, I got a little bit smarter and it became, good, vegetables and pasta and, I might treat myself to a bit of chocolate after weigh-in. But I always had this weird thing after my fights. My treat would always be Fruit Loops.
Do you eat Fruit Loops any other time?
Absolutely not. No way. And I think it was because as a kid I was never allowed to have them. And then as a fighter I was like, what's the one thing I want to eat? I was like, Fruit Loops got the highest sugar content of anything I know.
And when you had that pizza after weigh-in early on, how did you actually feel? Like, did you feel terrible? Like, yeah.
Sluggish and bloated. I only did it a couple of times before I worked out, oh, this is probably dumb.
It tasted so good, but
Yeah. And it goes back to that nutritionist. She actually said to me what I said before about if you have to run a half marathon tomorrow, what are you going to eat? And, my answer is not going to be a big greasy pizza.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I'm going to have some vegetables, I'm going to have some good carbs, I'm not going to eat too much, I'm going to hydrate well. And that really changed my mentality because it's like, well, yes, what am I going to eat to perform? Not what am I going to eat because I've missed out on this for the last 12 weeks. So, yeah.
So when you were competing, you're definitely balancing responsibilities between studying, your responsibilities at the gym. Were you still training? Were you training people at the same time as you were preparing for fights?
Sure was, yes. Right. I never had a not extremely busy day. Life's always been pretty hectic, but that's what I mean. I've always been a fighter that thought about plan B, thought about life after fighting. So I was determined to get my degree done. And
what degree did you do?
I did business and marketing.
Yeah.
So I guess relevant to what I do. But yeah, also maintaining my business was challenging, but COVID hit and the fight stopped. So, if I didn't have that secure business that was established and smooth running, then that would have been a real problem for me as a fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And now when it comes to diet and stuff, what are some of the takeaways? Like, what have you incorporated into your everyday life in your post fighting career? Well, first post fighting career.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just knowing how to fuel your body. So, like really treating food as fuel. So thinking about, all right, what have I got to do today or what have I got to do this week? And what do I need to consume to achieve, what I need to achieve this week. So my relationship with food definitely has changed for the better. And I'm really glad that it did before I became a trainer because, if I had taken some of what I was doing in my early stages of my career into being a trainer, I think I could have had quite a negative effect on my students without meaning to. So, learning about that relationship with food and going through those experiences now allows me to be a better trainer and, also prepare my fighters better, but also, educate them as people as well.
I always feel bad for a fighter who's done all the right things and given up everything to step in the cage or into the ring and lose in 10 seconds. And, and especially if somebody else their opponent has done the wrong stuff and just come off, didn't train hard and they get a win and it's like, that's the game really. But if you've done everything you could to prepare properly, you put yourself in the best position. But I still feel terrible for someone who goes and gets knocked out in, 5 or 10 seconds. Like,
that's not great, but that's the gamble that we take, isn't it? Every time we step in there, it can happen.
Yeah, it's a chance every single time. And when you and now as you're advising young people that are coming into the gym, what are a few of the mistakes that you're seeing, say, teenagers make in terms of diet and their fitness outside of the gym and their lifestyles outside of the gym that if you're being Carly mum, what would you get them to pull back on?
There's kind of two ends of the spectrum. So you get young people that train so well and eat so well during the week, then they hit the weekend and the party life kicks in. So trying to educate young people around still living a balanced life, but understanding that the effects of what they consume on the weekend can have massive effects on their training week. So, yeah, that's a big thing. And then you can get sort of the other end of the spectrum where people go so hard into sport that you just watch young people and you're like, I give it a year and then you're going to totally resent sport. So I personally had a young female junior fighter and she actually came to me after being a professional diver for years. So her training schedule was just absolutely ridiculous. But when she came to me, she already had that foundation. So she was an incredible athlete. Her diet was on point, training was on point. She fought solid for probably 12 to 18 months. And then she hit a point and I was just, I remember having a conversation with her and just being like, it's been too hard too soon. You need to take a step back and you need to live life a little bit. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very long career. So, two ends of the spectrum with young people. And, yeah, you've kind of got to find that balance.
Absolutely. I was asking before, this is a change of topic, but when you knock somebody out, what does that feel like? Is it just like, yeah?
Yeah, and not so. How many fights have you won by knockout?
300.
So many she can't even remember.
No, it's not too many. Remember, a knockout and a technical knockout, two completely different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, actual knockout, I think it's 3 or 4.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what are your emotions like a few minutes after that happens?
To be honest, you just land it and I don't know, I just kind of go blank. But the first thing that comes to my mind every time is I hope my opponent's okay. So I never, as a fighter, I never had that instant feel of victory. It was always
concern.
Quickly evaluate the situation. Is my opponent okay?
Yep.
And then I'll kind of celebrate. So yeah, I don't know. I can't speak for every fighter, but that's usually the first thing that I think about is I actually hope they're okay because we both get in here not wanting to leave, not being able to walk out.
And have you ever had one of those big beefs with another fighter and where you've been a little bit happy that maybe you did knock them out? Or?
I had one.
Okay, tell us about this. This is the one I was after.
If anyone's been
we don't need to use any names.
If anyone's been in the Muay Thai scene since I've been fighting, they probably know there is one fighter from New Zealand that we had some issues.
Some beef.
Yeah.
And where did that stem from? Where did it all begin?
I think a lack of sportsmanship for sure.
Okay. So a respect issue.
Yeah, definitely. So originally it was for quite a big title, which I won the first one, which they thought that they won it, so which was fine. So agreed to a rematch. The second one came around and I also... So
it was a points decision?
Yeah, points decision. So no knockout, no...
And what was your feeling on that fight? Did you feel that you won or did you feel lucky when you won and thought,
no, I thought I was confident that I had won, but, yeah, that was fine. So, and then we agreed to the rematch and I also won that fight, which, it was not great. But, I mean, after the...
It wasn't great?
Sorry, I mean as in that the result of what came about after that win was
not great. So the fight itself.
The fights were fantastic.
It went well, and you felt good in the ring, and you step out of the ring, the fight's over, and then the aftermath is what was not great. The aftermath,
yeah.
And is that like a press conference? Is that a
social media?
Social media.
Social media can be great, or it can be a bit of a devil. So yeah, I'm very big on sportsmanship. I'm very big on showing respect. If you don't agree with the decision, there's a time and a place to do it, and there's an official way to.
But then there's
take
Instagram.
Yes, and Facebook. So bad. So yeah, it was a bit of a social media war, which I really didn't engage in at all. But
so this opponent was putting it out there. I won. this is
but that's a polite way of putting it, essentially.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just
trying to be nice.
it wasn't just disrespect to me. It was it was to the promoter as well.
It was at the promoter, and it was at the judges. So was it directed to you personally as well?
Oh, of course, it was to the judges. It was to the promoter. It was to everything, and just the way that it was handled. It really lacked professionalism, and it was horrible. I was a little bit younger, so a lot of the things that were being said about me online, they still stick with me to this day. But again, it was.
And was that against your character or against your performance? Or
a bit of everything. So I think people tend to get on the bandwagon when fighters have quite a large following. So I got quite a few hate messages from fans and
out of the blue. So you're in your inbox and all of a sudden there's a message.
Oh yeah, 100%. It was all over Facebook for a little while. Well, mine anyway, because obviously I have everyone from the community on Facebook. So that was probably the hardest part of my career, was dealing with that second rematch. I would have happily have taken a loss if it meant that none of that was to come about. Wow. But at the same time, I still have watched it over and over again. I still believe that I won both of those fights fair and square, and the aftermath of what came about from it was a real example of it was an example of bad sportsmanship. And but at the same time, I think it was a big pivot point in my career because it showed my character. So I try to use that example with some of our fighters now, how you conduct yourself in and outside the ring, on social media, all of that contributes to you as a person. And I always say to people that you are a person long after you're a fighter. So, the decisions that you make and how you go about things, whether you win or lose, it's all comes down to your character. So, bad time in my life, but also, probably where I learned the most about myself and the sort of person that I wanted to be.
So you've won twice. It should be redemption. You should be on top of the world. And then how does that feel? Like you should be here, but you're being dragged down. And do you kind of feel like all of a sudden you're fighting the rest of the world, or did you feel like you had a lot of support and that these were just people that were outliers? Like, what was the dynamic there?
It was hard because some of the stories online were false. So there were a lot of legitimate people in the sport that I looked up to that were unfortunately not on my side.
Yeah.
Which looking back at it is all good. At the time, I didn't realise the support that I actually had.
And how old were you at the time?
I would have been 19 or 20.
Okay, so, yeah, right. Yeah.
So pretty young.
Yeah.
So at the time I felt like the world was against me. I went into a pretty bad place. I stopped fighting for quite a while. And then when I came back, that was when I had a complete change of mindset. So the time off actually did me some good. But I think every athlete is faced with, with problems like this. You only have to go online and see an AFL picture that Channel 7 News has put up, and to read some of the comments on there, like it baffles me that there's people out there that actually write things like that.
And how did you disengage yourself, or how did you kind of remove yourself from that situation so you could get your mind clear? And what would you advise other young athletes that might find themselves in a social media shitstorm? What strategies could you suggest for those guys?
Well, I think just switching off is really important, and it's really hard when you're in that position, especially as a young person. Your image is everything, and what people think about you, you think it's the be all and end all.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky to have family around me that actually took my phone away and just deleted all accounts off so that I couldn't get them on my phone. So that was great. But yeah, with you're in that position, it's really hard to deal with. So
how long did it take for things to simmer down until you felt comfortable with one, with that situation, and then two, when did you feel comfortable to get back onto social media?
It was the social media shitstorm probably went for 2 months. I think after the fight, it was just it was constant. It was really constant. So yeah, that was really difficult to deal with, but. Yeah, it's hard, but I try and even though some of the fighters don't go through anything to do with fight stuff, but they deal with issues on social media, I always try and explain to them that things like this come about when you're making waves, when you're doing well for yourself. And when you're in that position, it's hard to think like that. But if you're not doing something that bothers some people, then, maybe you're not doing enough. Like, you get to that point, if you're making big waves, there's going to be people that try and rock the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've just got to keep reminding yourself of that.
Easy to criticize, hard to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
it.
What about when the fight, the rematch, because there was some bad blood, did it change your strategy, or when you were in the fight, did you feel any change in terms of you were trying to do different? Are you throwing a bit extra on certain things, or did it affect you mentally going into it?
It didn't actually, which I don't know how it didn't, but the trainers that I was working with at the time made it their mission to constantly remind me that if I go into a fight angry or with too much emotion, I'm not going to perform well, and I'm going to get hit too much, and the emotions come out and the fight doesn't go the way that you want it to. So I was really lucky that I had a coach at the time that was great at visualization. So in the lead up to that rematch, we did a lot of that work so that I had actually gone through the scenario time and time again in my head, so that when I went out there, I wasn't thinking about what had happened outside of the ring. It was just, this is just an opponent. This is my game plan. I need to execute that. When we get out, we can worry about the rest.
What was your feeling of your opponent in the ring on that second fight? Did you feel that she was doing the same, or did you feel like there was a bit of emotion there and then that was an advantage to you?
Yeah, probably a little bit of an advantage to me. I think looking back at it in hindsight, the backlash that came from the fight, the things that she wrote on social media obviously came from a place where she couldn't control that emotion. So I think in the second fight that worked out well for me, because I kind of was able to push it to the side thanks to the help that I had in my corner. But yeah, I think that's a big lesson for fighters is you shouldn't take too much emotion into a fight. You've got to think clearly, but it also comes down to what sort of fighter you are as well. Like, some fighters might perform great if they're in a rage. So, I think that, do you know what, the first fight and the second fight were much for muchness. It was pretty much the same fight. I think in the second one I was probably edged even more. So, yeah.
Yeah, and any talk of a trilogy or?
Oh, there was a promoter looking for he couldn't find me an opponent, and he did put it up on social media, and she asked for a third one, and it wasn't until that point that I realised how much support I had. I had people on there saying, 2 wins is enough. We don't need a third one. There's a part of me that thinks, if I get back in the ring, I will definitely take the third one. But it won't be a grudge match to me. It will just be another fight.
Very interesting. So you're almost emotionally separated from all of that. It seems to me like you're not carrying any emotion in your voice as you talk about that at all.
It's taken a lot of work to get there, to be honest. Like, it's the things that I received online were pretty bad. So I had to work through those. So that's why I stepped away from fighting for a little bit. So I would be lying if I said that it didn't take a lot of time and effort and professional help to get over that. So, I'm pretty stoked with where I'm at now, that I don't carry that on my shoulders. But, yeah.
And is that something that you were ever prepared for, or that you'd ever thought might happen in your career? So, or is it something you'd ever seen elsewhere in Muay Thai before, that type of social media shitstorm, that type of confrontation, that type of post-match grudgery?
We see it everywhere, don't we, in every combat sport and every sport. But to be honest, I honestly thought it would never happen to me, because I've never been disrespectful. I've never slammed anyone online. I've never called anyone out. I won't even do that. So I didn't think it would happen to me, and it did. So yeah, it was a bit of a wake-up call. But one of my trainers once said to me when I won my first ever belt, he said, there's now a target on your back, and people will go to great lengths to shoot that target. And I think I always
You're like,
think,
I'm feeling good. I just won the title. What are
I
you
know.
talking about?
I was like, why are you bringing this
Thanks,
negativity
mate.
onto
He's
me?
whispering as you're walking out the ring. He's whispering it into you.
Literally.
There's a target on your back.
So I've got this belt on my front, and I'm just picturing this this archery target on my back. But how right he was, you know, like you do get to a point, and it could be in any career, in anything in your life. If you get to a point where you're high enough, people will try and bring you down. So he was right in saying that, and I'm kind of glad that I got that little bit of insight, because it kind of, when I went through the shitstorm, I remembered that, and I went, you know what, this was going to happen eventually. So this
Isn't
is
it
just
crazy
my time.
that people will say those things or send you these horrible messages through the power of the internet? But if they were standing in front of you, they would never say that sort of thing. It's just insane to me that they're quite happy to send abuse.
Yeah, that's it.
Virtual abuse.
It's easy to do from
you're in the
interstate.
same room as them. Absolutely,
The keyboard warriors.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, but if you're in the same room, they won't say a single thing, and it's like,
no, that's like, you know, the UFC is terrible for it. People jump online and giving their opinions of the fights, and it's like, oh, if you would never say that to that fighter, that fighter would probably kill you in 1 second. Yet you're telling them that they telegraph their jab too much. That jab would really kill you, mate.
And now as a mentor to other young females, is that, as horrible as that experience has been, has it helped? Does it now help you in preparing other young athletes for what might come about if they reach a certain level?
Oh, 100%. I always bring it up. I always share that experience. Sometimes I even use it as an example, you know, because obviously there's video footage of just after the fight and how things went about. I use it as an example of, you know, if you ever act this way, it's not acceptable, and you won't be fighting from this gym again. Like, you'll be leaving on really bad terms. So I do use it as an example of bad sportsmanship. But yeah, it's all a learning curve, isn't it? Like, every bad experience has allowed me to actually be a better trainer now. So I'm grateful that I went through it.
Because I'm thinking that's something that perhaps your trainers, like that last generation of trainers or so, that's not something that they would have ever been able to, but they wouldn't have never encountered it. The social media side of things.
Yeah, totally different world.
just carry a pigeon.
Yeah, that's smoke signals. What did he mean? I don't think he likes me. Yeah, you suck.
No, you suck. Get a fire up.
Yeah, it's like a totally different world, isn't it? Like, I can't even imagine trying to be a parent in this day and age with social media. It's pretty crazy. But I definitely, the trainers around me were obviously older, and they were kind of baffled at the whole thing, and for a little while didn't understand the severity of what it was. You know, there was a lot of defamation online and whatnot, you know, had a business attached to it. So it was difficult. But
And what's your relationship with social media now?
Do you know what? I actually, after that, I just had a bit of a clean out of my social media. And I think I always try and tell the young girls at the gym especially, you know, you really got to select the pages and the people that you follow on social media. There's a lot of crap out there, as we know. Anything in the fitness industry, 90% of it is crap. Making sure that you're following decent pages, decent people with good messages, ones that are realistic, and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of influencers out there that can warp young people's view of the world. Indeed.
And I think what the world needs is more influencers like you. And
thank you.
And I think anybody who has a daughter or a son even, or a gender neutral person, whatever it might be, that may be thinking, look, martial arts is a great way to build confidence. It's a great way to build self-esteem. It's a great way to get fit and strong. How can they find out more about you, Carly? Not on social media.
After everything I've just said, I'm all over social media.
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
But sharing positive messages and trying to make the social media world a little bit nicer in the combat sports world. So, all over social media, believe it or not.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, so if you want to follow Carly, how can people follow you?
So we are at Boars Martial Arts and Females Fighting Forward on Instagram and Facebook, and we've also got websites up on Google. So jump on there, and
and the Pride Fight Series is coming up on the 24th of July.
Series coming up. So get amongst it, SA people. It's going to be great.
Fantastic. And if people want to buy tickets for that?
Yep, they can go to pridefightseries.com.au or they can purchase from participating clubs.
Fantastic, Carly. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, guys.